Hello everyone, and welcome to the Church360 Ledger training session, Checks and Payees. My name is Kendall Woolery. I've been here in Concordia for just shy of 4 years. I am the lead software support technician. On the screen we have our support phone number as well as our support email. Definitely feel free to contact us should you have any questions. Today we are going to be going over checks and payees. We'll have 25 minutes for the presentation. We'll have time left over for questions. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and ask them, and I will address them in order at the end of the session. And the recording will be available once this session is over. So we're going to be talking about a few conventions for Church360 Ledger. We'll talk about it, the fact that it uses fund accounting, it uses dual entry bookkeeping. We'll talk a little bit about the debits and credits chart and how that works. We'll also talk about the transaction types that Church360 Ledger uses. We'll go over payees, what a payee is, how to enter a payee. We'll be talking about checks and check printing, transaction management, which includes voiding transactions, creating reoccurring transactions, and we'll talk about the general ledger report, which is going to allow you to get a report for the transactions that you've added into the program. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to talk about real quick is the conventions for Church360 Ledger. So it does make use of fund accounting, which is essentially using restricted accounts to set money aside for specific purposes. Example could be a building fund, a memorial fund. So 360 Ledger uses restricted accounts to allow you to make use of fund accounting. You'll be able to set money aside for specific purposes. Now, dual entry bookkeeping is essentially when you create transactions having to use two line items. So when you record a deposit, you're going to have your asset account and you're also going to have your income account. And these two line items are required for entering in the transaction. And here is an example of a debit credits chart. You can see here for assets, to increase it, we're going to debit it. To decrease an asset, we'll credit it. Liabilities, to increase, you're going to credit it. To decrease it, you'll debit. Income accounts, credit to increase, debit to decrease. Expense accounts, you're going to debit your expense account to decrease it and credit it. Debit your expense account to increase it and credit it to decrease it. And let's go ahead and get signed in, and we'll talk about the transaction types that Church360 Ledger allows you to use. So once we're signed in the upper right-hand corner, we'll have our new transaction button. The types of transactions that we're going to be able to create are transfers, deposits, payments, checks, and journal entries. Transfers are used to transfer money between similar type accounts. So for example, if I click on transfers and I choose an asset account, I'm only going to be able to choose an asset account to make the transfer. So this is asset to asset transactions or income to income, expense to expense. There's the system kind of helps you, so when you use a transfer, it's only going to allow you to transfer between similar type accounts. The next transaction type that we have is your deposit. This will be as money comes into the church, offerings, rental income, miscellaneous income, you'll use the deposit transaction to get those added in. Under assets, you would choose your bank account. Under income, you would choose your particular income account. And again, deposits help you out by limiting you to the type of accounts you can use. In this case, it's going to let you use asset accounts and your income accounts, and that'll be it. The next transaction type we have is a payment. Payments are going to be considered more along the lines of online transactions. So you pay a bill online. It allows you to use asset and liability or expense and liability. The next transaction type, and what we're going to be talking about a lot today, is your check. Checks are going to be used to pay your bills, whether you write a check out manually or you print the checks from within Church360 Ledger. Gives you the ability to create a check. And the last transaction type we have is journal entries, which are kind of like the catch-all. You're in control of the debits and credits, so you're going to be able to choose whatever line items you want, whatever accounts you want to use, and update your transaction that way. And before we get started on checks, we'll go over payees. So payees are going to be anybody that you are, any person, anybody, any company that you are paying money to. This can be found under settings and then payees, and that'll open up our payee screen. Down at the very bottom, in this case, since I have quite a few, you'll have the option to add a new one. The only things required when you add a new payee are the payee name, the street, phone, city, state, zip, and notes are all optional. You don't have to do those. And another thing is when you're creating a transaction, in this case a check, if your account doesn't exist, you can create it while you're creating the transaction. So you wouldn't have to close out and go back to the payee screen first. So it does give you the flexibility if you're missing or you don't have a payee in the system, enter it while you're entering the transaction and it'll create it, and then you can always go back in after the fact and edit it, and that's going to allow you to save you time, allowing you to create the payee right away. So let's go ahead and take a look at checks. So for the check transaction, we have some parts of the form that we can fill out. The memo is optional, but it's always a good idea to add the memo in, so when you go back and look at the check, you're going to have an idea of what the check was for, or why what reason we had to write this check. You have the date. This can always be changed to a different date if you need to be. Check number, you can enter this in now, or you can enter it in when you print, and we'll be going over the check printing shortly as well. Next, we have our assets or liability account, our amount, and then our expense or liability account. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and add a transaction in here. Go ahead and choose, let's see here, to my electric bill. So I've got that in there. I'm not concerned with my check, and I'm going to go ahead and date this for Friday the 16th. As you can see, once I've entered in my checking account or my bank account and my expense account, it shows down here what's going on. So in this case, it is crediting my checking account, decreasing it, and debiting my my expense account, increasing it. So once I've got this done, I can go ahead and click on Save, and that's going to create the transaction. And you can see here pop up this message that it was added to the print queue, which takes us into our next thing, which is check printing. So up here at the top, you'll see this icon, and this is kind of like your check printing preview kind of icon. When we click on that, it's going to show us all the checks that we've created. In this case, I've got my check that I dated here for 9/16. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and you have a couple of different options when you do that. If you manually wrote the check, you can go ahead and check this box that says marked as printed. It will not require you to print it, or it won't ask you to print it again. And keep in mind, once you do mark something as printed, there is no going back. The only way to do this would be to void the transaction and then add it back in. So I've got this check set up here. I'll go ahead and click on the print button. That's going to give me a preview of my check so I can see exactly what the check will look like. Once I've verified everything looks good, I'll go ahead and click on the print option. It has a check number in here, but I want to change this to be something else. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my check number and hit confirm. Now you can see I've got my check preview here, and at this point in time, I'd go ahead and click on print. I don't have a printer set up here, so I'll just go ahead and cancel out of this. And then once you're done with the check, you'll see here it'll show on the list. And in this case, I'll say that I've already printed it off and I'm happy with it. Go ahead and mark as printed. Say confirm. Remove the check from my queue. And if I go back to the home screen, you'll now see that my check is listed here, and it's in the system and taken care of and everything. So that's essentially how you go through, create a check, new transactions, check. Check number is optional. Payees required. Your both accounts are required. Next thing we're going to be talking about is transaction management, which essentially means voiding a transaction that's no longer needed or incorrect, and as well as creating reoccurring transactions. Since this, we'll go ahead and start with the reoccurring first, since I've already got this transaction in here. Since this electric bill happens every month, what I could do to make it a little bit easier for me is come in and I can do make reoccurring. This kind of serves two purposes. One, it'll always pop up on a date that I tell it, and kind of let me know that my bill is coming due. And two, it saves me time, and then I can simply click on this transaction. I can update the amount of the bill and save it, and my check will be done. So in this case, I've got my transaction name. In this case, I'm just going to call it electric bill. I'm going to say it occurs every single month on the, we'll call it the 15th day, and I'll save that. So the reoccurring transaction was created. So if I go under settings and then reoccurring transactions, I'll be able to see the electric bill that I've created, electric bill, check, the amount, and the 15th of every month. So as soon as, and let's go ahead and make this kind of fire off so we can see how it looks. I'm going to go ahead and update that. So now when I look at my pending transactions icon up here, you can see my check for the electric bill for September. So if I go ahead and click on that, it brings my check right up. I can simply, say this amount got increased to $65. Save that check, and now I've just added my check into the system. So every month, this particular transaction would roll around, and then I just click on it, and it's going to allow me to quickly add it in versus having to recreate it every single time. Now, the next thing we'll talk about is voiding transactions. In this case, we realize we have the bill in here twice and we needed it once, so I'm going to go ahead and click on this particular check. That'll open up the check screen for me. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and click on void, and it has voided the check. You can see it keeps it in the system. It when I highlight it, it tells me when I voided it. And if I click on that transaction, it'll show me the amount that I had written it for, so I kind of have an idea of what the check was for versus it just saying zero like it shows here. And you can see our balances are corrected with the money being taken out. So the use of reoccurring transactions can definitely make your job easier for transactions that happen over and over. So I mean, if you have a lot of bills that you pay monthly, reoccurring transactions would definitely be the way to go. Next thing we'll talk about then is once you've created all these transactions, you're going to want to be able to get reports out to show what activity you're doing or what's happened throughout the month, throughout the year, and so forth. Under reports, we'll have the option for the general ledger report. And there's quite a few things that we can do with this report. Up here at the top, you have the option to take it out to Excel, print it, as well as look at a specific time frame. You can see here we have all these prior years in here, as well as quarters. The quarters will be broken down by your calendar, your fiscal year. If you're January to December, then it would be the first 3 months would be quarter one, next through quarter two, and so forth. You can look at specific months in general versus an entire year. Also, you can come down here and you can manipulate the date ranges to look at a specific week of transactions, specific 2 weeks, so that you're only looking at a subset of transactions. I'm going to go ahead and set it out for a year so we can see the transactions for an entire year. You will notice that it does show my voided transaction on here, and it is in red, kind of denoting that we have voided it. There are a few things that we can do with this report. You're going to have the ability to sort by types. You can see here we have check, payments, deposit, transfers, and journal entries. If I only wanted to see the checks that I've written, I can uncheck all these boxes, and then I will be left with my checks. Next thing we have the option to do is look for a specific payee. If I only wanted to look at what I paid let's say my gas company, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck all. Go ahead and do my gas company, and then you can now see that, still showing checks. You can now see that all the history that I've done with this particular payee for the entire year, and you can see what I voided out and so forth, changes that I made to checks that I've actually made and everything. What's also nice too, I'm going to go ahead and show everything again, is you can group by payee. So grouping by payee allows you to kind of sort everything out so it's grouped by a particular payee. So we have a lot of transactions that aren't tied to a payee, but if I scroll down, let's see here, I should be able to find some here shortly. So now we have our first account, and you can see all the transactions for that account have been grouped by payee. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down so we have a smaller time frame to look at. Just going to take it, let's see, reload that real quick so it updates it. There we go. So group back by payee, which, let's see. So now you can see, our list isn't too bad. So now you can see we have a list of all the transactions and grouped by payee. So we can see, with which each specific payee, what we paid them, and kind of get a snapshot of, the transactions that we've done. The next thing we're going to have the ability to do is choose specific accounts and group by account. So if I only wanted to see a few different funds, I could uncheck everything, take a look at my general fund, and see exactly what shows for that, the deposits and everything based upon the time frame that I put in. I'll also have the ability to group by account, and I'm going to go back and select all. So now you can see since I've grouped by account, it's showing me all the transactions for each income account that I've got listed here, as well as each expense account. In this case, we're looking at deposits here, so we're not going to see anything for not showing anything for. There's a check right there, I guess. So, but I mean, using these different options gives you the ability to look at specific accounts, group by accounts, versus seeing everything all just spread out by date and everything. And we've got the memo field if you put any memos in there that you'll be able to see. And then you'll be able to see the amount of the transaction. So with this report, like I said, we can export it to Excel, which will give us, see if I can get an example here of that. You will always have to enable editing. It's just one of those things that it'll always bring up. But now you can see, kind of gives you a replica of what you see on the screen. You got your date, the transaction type, check number, payee, account, memo, the amount. In this case, I voided a transaction, so that's why that shows. And then from this view, you could definitely print this Excel file out, or you can go back here and do the print from here, which will give you a print preview. I'll let that load back up here. And so you're able to see exactly what's happened and everything and what you've done. So that's pretty much everything went over today. We talked about the conventions for Church360 Ledger, that it uses fund accounting, which is essentially using funds and restricting money for specific purposes. Talked about the dual entry bookkeeping, which is each transaction must have a minimum of 2 line items, and your debits and credits must equal. We showed an example of the debits and credits chart, which kind of goes over what to do with increasing or decreasing your accounts, what type of entry you'll need to make. We talked about the transaction types that Church360 Ledger allows you to use, transfers, which are similar type accounts, deposits, payments, which are more like electronic payments, checks, and journal entries. We talked about payees, which are essentially companies that you're paying money to. The process of entering payees, being able to do it under settings, payees, as well as entering in the payee name while you're creating your transaction. We talked about adding an actual check in and then going over the printing of those checks from the print queue window and how to print those, how to remove those. One quick thing I'll touch on real quick, under settings general is where you can choose what check style you're using, whether it's the middle check or the top check, and then if you use 2 signature or 1 signature checks. Then we also talked about transaction management, which is voiding transactions or as well as creating reoccurring transactions to make things easier for you. And you manage your reoccurring transactions under settings, reoccurring transactions. And if you don't want any of these transactions, click on it and delete. And then lastly, we went over the general ledger report and talked about how that report can help you get information out, how to configure the report to only see accounts or only see views that you want to see. At this time, if there are any questions, I'll definitely answer those. And then if there's no other questions, then we do have a blog available that goes over any updates that we release, and that can be found at 360ledger.com/blog. You can also sign up for the blog to get updates as we release them. We do have a manual available for 360 Ledger that can be purchased for $25 plus shipping at 360ledger.com/training. Again, my name was Kendall Woolery, software support tech here at Concordia. This is our support email address and our support phone number. So should you have any questions, just let us know. At the time, I do thank you guys for attending. And again, the video will be made available. I believe it will be emailed out to you once it's been uploaded and everything. And if you have any other questions, feel free to let us know. Thank you. Bye-bye.